Hello everyone, Bag here. It's time. The prophesized moment has arrived for this channel, as I finally have an excuse to talk about Break thanks to the Dahlia. You have no idea how excited I've been for this video, so let's get into things. As I haven't covered the Dahlia until now on my channel, I want to take a bit longer than normal covering her so we're on the same page. But if you just want to skip to the list, then skip to this time. The Dahlia is a Fire and Agility break support with a few unique traits. Her skill deploys a field that gives the team 50% weakness break efficiency, which is the same amount as Ranmei or RM Fugue, while also dealing equal damage to 3 adjacent units. This field also activates the Dahlia's primary gimmick, in that allies can now proc Super Break regardless of if the enemy is broken. You still need to element match with the enemy to deal this damage, but even if the enemy is toughness locked, the Super Break damage will still come through. Oh, and also this skill field is generated with her technique, and it lasts for 3 turns. For the other main part of her kit, her talent designates one ally and herself as the dance partner, with this partner either being the unit who initiated combat or the unit with the highest break effect. The bullet points on the dance partner is that A, both of them get access to a 60% super break ratio, B, both of their elements are implanted to all enemies, with the Dahlia's defense shredding ultimate, and C, the Dahlia launches a follow-up attack whenever the other dance partner attacks, once per turn, with this follow-up attack being 5 random bounces of fire damage, which then means random toughness damage in those bounces. This also generates 1 SP for every other follow-up attack. Finally, she also gives a very large break effect buff that partly scales off of her own break effect, but only if the team has a sustain. And she also gives a 2-turn 30% speed buff to any ally that implants a weakness, which includes giving this buff to herself because her own ultimate is an implant. So yeah, a pretty basic kit, and so as we get into the list, I think the first thing that we need to talk about is how she compares and synergizes with the other big supports, Ranmei, HMC, and Fugue. One of the Dahlia's biggest boons is her ability to consolidate important niches at E0, being the only unit at E0 to give both 50% weakness break efficiency and a super break ratio. This means in a standard team with Fugue and a sustain, replacing Ranmei means keeping the same weakness break efficiency while also just adding a super break ratio, which is a big boost in damage. And while Ranmei keeping the enemy broken is great for breaks uptime, the Dahlia at least partially solves this thanks to her permanent super break uptime. Replacing Ranmei here also means getting a lot more toughness damage through Dahlia's skill, ult, and follow-ups, which are guaranteed to do toughness damage thanks to the Dahlia's fire implant. Or if we go the sustainless route, we can now either have triple super break ratios, or 100% weakness break efficiency with RM Fugue, or some combination of these. Having the Dahlia here just opens the ceiling up for the stats a break carry can work off of. No matter who you replace with Dahlia besides RM Fugue, you're either getting more super break or more weakness break efficiency. Granted, her super break ratio is quite low compared to Fugue or HMC's, but again, considering neither of them have any weakness break efficiency at base, it's still a pretty dang good deal. Mix and matching these supports obviously varies from carry to carry, but it is important to note how generally the Dahlia changes how break plays. Now that you don't need to break to deal super break damage, break is no longer an all or nothing archetype that rides or dies on if their toughness damage is enough to maximize their damage windows. Weakness break efficiency is still important for damage overall, as not only is breaking still a very important part of the archetype's damage, but also super break scales directly on how much toughness damage you deal, which weakness break efficiency increases. And to clarify, regular break damage doesn't care about toughness damage, and instead mainly scales on the enemy's max toughness. The last thing to note about the broad strokes here is that Harmony units do have some unique benefits that incentivizes sustainless runs over just Fugue Dahlia sustain. For one, DDD. For two, there's the Battle Pass Lycone that shares a damage multiplier with the Dahlia signature and nothing else. And 3, HMC and Ranmei are the only break supports that can run Watchmaker, which at least does something to kind of make up for the lost break effect from not activating the Dahlia's first trace. So, I mean, tiering these supports feels entirely arbitrary, since they all work together, and as I alluded to, mix and matching them mostly just comes down to the carry, the enemy, and the fight. So sure, I'll put them all in their own little S tier. Hooray! Also, something worth noting here with herself, Fugue, and Gallagher is that her guaranteed AoE fire implants helps all of them do their toughness damage job a lot more consistently, which is really nice. This also goes for making the Kalpagni set always work. So I guess this set is more of a Dahlia shill than a Firefly shill, huh? Okay, let's find a break carry to talk about first. Rappa! Everyone's first choice, I'm sure. Rappa is a good starting example of one of the Dahlia's weird quirks with her utility, which is that all break carries still want to, well, break. For Rappa, this comes in the form of her charge stacking, which is a very large contributor to her overall damage. Instead, the Dahlia here mainly helps maintain consistency in damage uptime. Now, you don't need to specifically break an enemy to deal any damage to them, and while breaking as much as you can is still the priority, now the path to breaking an enemy actually involves dealing damage to them, which is a big deal. And to be clear, it's not like the Dahlia is averse to helping you break, as it's kind of the opposite. She literally gives the same baseline weakness break efficiency as any other source, so if anything, she helps you break faster than before depending on your team comp. Besides the imaginary implant, which is very obviously important, the fire implant is big here, as Rappa likes getting charged from her teammates breaking, who are, well, mostly entirely fire. Now for some caveats. For one, the Dahlia's ultimate rotation is way too slow to actually rely on for non-imaginary weak, non-fire weak pure fictions. So while her implant can help in AoE non-imaginary weak fights that don't constantly rotate the roster of enemies, it doesn't really help Rappa that much in broadening her pure fiction application. This could be solved with E2 Dahlia, which instantly implants and death shreds every enemy when they spawn, which would then also get rid of the problem of her needing to manually death shred every enemy. As pure fiction has rather long fights, this can make going sustainless more difficult, especially if you are replacing Ranmei and her extra survivability. So getting the full insane break buff stacking here is less plausible, but still doable with how sustainless geared break is as an archetype, especially thanks to Rappa being imaginary with her imprisoned. If we are talking teams, the main core will be Fugue and Dahlia, plus preferably Lingsha if not Gallagher. Fugue is technically replaceable here, but with how much Rappa relies on her extra toughness for charge generation, I would say it's an uphill battle to justify it. For sustainless, I would recommend HMC over Ranmei just due to the added ease of spamming Super Break. And if we're trying to clear the fight fast, then spamming DDD is a great way to do so. Plus HMC is element matching, so they'll contribute toughness damage no matter what. Although keep in mind that HMC's Super Break ratio does decrease the more enemies there are, so in AoE fights their damage boost isn't at its best. Wholly recommending HMC over Ranmei is impossible however, as Ranmei's re-breaking may be needed to win a fight, and even if not, the added weakness break efficiency might sometimes be needed to reach break thresholds. It's inconsistent, meaning either one of them will be great here, and it will largely be fight dependent to see which one is actually better. Keep in mind also here that without the theoretically free Ranmei E1, her damage amping does become noticeably worse than HMC's outright, so if you have kept her at E0, then it's not as close of a race. And the same goes for if you have the Battle Pass icon for her to hold, as HMC loses a lot more for holding it with how important DDD is to their utility. Still, with how good Lingsha is in pure fiction, especially if it's a fire weak pure fiction, I would say Rappa is the least dependent on running sustainless with the Dahlia in order to see a good performance. So yeah, Rappa goes in the S tier. I really wonder how many people will go into the S tier today. Yeah, the format with these videos kind of breaks with a unit like this, so let's just move on. Alright, let's spin the wheel again. Firefly. What 90% of you are here for? Great. Well, to absolutely no one's surprise, Firefly benefits the most from the Dahlia here, for a lot of pretty obvious reasons. Thanks to her technique and enhanced skills fire implants, Firefly will have literally 100% uptime of Dahlia's 30% speed bonus. This opens up a new realm of speed tuning, in where you're basically trying to get close to a bit less than an effective 280 speed. Her alt state has a fixed 70 speed, meaning with this speed tuning, you take 4 actions, and then right before your 5th, you exit the ult state. Then on her 5th turn, she then instantly re-enters her ult state and does a 5th enhanced skill, all within 150 action value. This is done so we spend as little time as possible outside of her ult form, purposely putting her next turn after the ult ends so we can get right back into it. If you're entering wave 2 of MOC in her ult form, this means 4 enhanced skills and 1 normal skill, since one of the actions that we counted earlier was at 0 action value right after ulting. This strat needs 178.4 speed out of combat without any additional help, although with Ranmei, E2 Fugue, or DDD, this does become easier, as with Ranmei, the speed drops to about 168, with only S5 DDD and only E2 Fugue, it's about 162, and with both of them, the speed drops to around 152. Even without this somewhat demanding speed tuning, a 30% speed buff is still great. That's more than a speed boot's worth of speed that she literally just gets for free. But you might be asking, Bag, how can we guarantee enough energy to get back into her ult on the first skill? Her normal skill generates 60% of her max energy, and the only way to generate energy inside her ult is to get hit. Well, I lied earlier, there is one more part to the Dahlia's kit. When an ally fire unit implants a weakness, they get 2 things. For one, the implanting hit gets a fixed 20 toughness damage added to it, and for 2, they get 10% of their max energy, with this being capped at giving 50% of the unit's max. Literally only Firefly can use this, and as long as she takes at least 4 turns in her ult, she'll have 40% of her max energy, meaning one skill will instantly get her ult back, fully removing any downtime issues that she has. The Dahlia can also use this too with her ultimate, so her ult also gets the fixed 20 toughness and 10% max energy for herself, which is cool, I guess. But wait, yeah, 20 fixed toughness is no joke. With 50% weakness break efficiency from the Dahlia and 50% from herself, her skill does 60 toughness damage to the primary enemy. Going from 60 to 80 is an increase of 33%. And this 20 fixed toughness also applies to her technique, which gives her a better head start in breaking as well. Really, Firefly just perfectly gets everything she would want from the Dahlia, in part because outside of her E2, she has no mechanics that revolve around breaking. So while she may take multiple turns to break an enemy, all of her super break damage will still be dealt no matter what. Getting weakness break efficiency and super break from a single unit, removing her ult downtime, giving a permanent 30% speed buff, contributing non-negligible fire toughness damage, generating occasional SP, which is nice for E0 Firefly who is kind of an SP black hole, and giving her a fixed extra toughness damage on top of her weakness break efficiency. Yeah, Firefly's doing a bit better with her, I think that's pretty safe to say. As for the teams, Firefly teams are the ones that benefit the least from Fugue, as again, she has no mechanics that rely on exo toughness. HMC is a side grade to slight upgrade depending on if the fight is imaginary weak and or if the fight has a low enemy count. If not, then Fugue is still probably better. HMC can also still be better if you need DDD to hit the aforementioned speed threshold, while Fugue has the advantage of freeing up the Trailblazer for other paths and teams. Ultimately, they'll be pretty close most of the time, and will also both be better than Ranmei in a sustained team most of the time. In a sustainless team, choosing 2 out of the 3 of these supports can be sorta tricky, but in a general sense, Fugue is consistent and has no exact weaknesses, but no real standout strengths either. HMC has good DDD spamming, good imaginary toughness damage, and a strong super break ratio in low enemy count fights, but they can be a bit SP hungry, and their strengths are highly variable depending on the fight, and Ranmei is great for survivability, for her weakness break efficiency, and for her small 10% speed, but she has no super break ratio, which is kinda rough. I would say overall, Fugue, Dahlia, Ranmei is the easiest sustainless team to recommend, but in fights where HMC is better, then replacing Ranmei is pretty easy so long as she isn't needed to keep the team alive. I would say it's expected to run sustainless on Firefly to get the most out of her, except for maybe in longer fights like Anomaly Arbitration, where doing so is less realistic. But if you just want to baseline clear and you don't care about low cycling, then sure, the Dahlia still lets her clear just fine with a comfort sustain instead. Overall, the Dahlia is a Firefly support first and foremost, if that wasn't obvious by how she was designed. So above all of the other arbitrary placings on this list, Firefly 100% deserves to be at the top. I'll plug you to subscribe. A full-on Dahlia guide should be out within a week, so stick around if you'd like to see that. And if you are a frequent watcher on this channel and you aren't subbed, then check to see if you are, as the majority of my viewers are still not subscribed. Alright, back to the vid. It's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. Boothill is the smallest benefactor here, but that's not to say that the Dahlia isn't a massive boost for him, not at all. But with how she is designed, she's much more of an effective stat stick instead of a genuine mechanic difference maker. First of all, Boothill does have the advantage of implanting both on his first skill thanks to his technique, and also on his ultimate, leading to him getting a shaky uptime of that 2-turn speed boost. And that speed is important, as you aren't really going to be running a -1 speed setup with Sunday or Bronya anymore. The aim of the game instead is fully on nuking the enemy with as much toughness damage as you can muster. Boothill, out of the 3 main break DPSs, is by far the most reliant on actually breaking the enemy. Firstly, like Rappa, he has his stacking mechanic with trickshot stacks, but primarily, he needs to break as his enhanced basic attack still needs the enemy to be broken to deal its big hit of damage. The Dahlia's skill does not fix this for him. So at base, the Dahlia wins by default in replacing Ranmei for an extra super break ratio, alongside the other previously mentioned boons. Or she can work alongside Ranmei in a sustainless team for an easier access to 100% weakness break efficiency. This also means E1 Fugue is that much more effective here for either 100% weakness break efficiency without Ranmei, or that coveted 150% with Ranmei. This focus on weakness break efficiency is less so about the scaling of his super break damage, which is still important, but it's also about making sure that he can have consistent uptime of his full enhanced basic. As if we're always able to at least break the enemy on his turn, then the Dahlia's problem of her utility not activating his big burst of damage becomes a non-issue. Like, if we're looking at an ult plus enhanced basic attack combo, combo with 150% weakness break efficiency and 3 trick shot stacks, we're hitting 200 toughness. But then also, the Dahlia would launch her follow-up in between the 2 attacks. So if this is a single target and all of the bounces launch on the enemy, that's an extra 30 toughness, since the Dahlia wouldn't benefit from E1 Fugue. Most enemies in the game have less than 200 toughness, meaning we can straight up one-shot their toughness bars with good timing of his ult usage, while also still not taking into account something like the Dahlia's E1 as well. And while this 150% weakness break efficiency is assuming E1 Fugue, we're also not counting any other sources of toughness damage that can get thrown before Boothill's turn, like anything from Fugue, or the Dahlia's actual turn, or even Ranmei's basic attack if the enemy is ice weak. Again, like with Rappa, while the Dahlia's utility isn't specifically made for Boothill, he can still benefit in a lot of ways, as now his ultimate will deal super break damage no matter what, which is good since a lot of its utility is in its toughness damage, but also if an enemy recovers from breaking and you can't just one-shot them, then his enhanced basic without the final hit will still do a lot of damage, just not as much damage as it otherwise would do. For teams, the baseline best comp for Boothill is, you guessed it, Dahlia Fugue, with Fugue hopefully at E1, and then you can either run Gallagher, Lingsha, or Sustainless, where Ranmei is mostly better than HMC here, unless if their unique niches are that much of a difference maker. Boothill, out of the 3 break carries, has the hardest time surviving thanks to his auto taunt and increased damage from the standoff state, so keeping the enemy broken might be needed here for practicality. But then again, if it is a single target imaginary weak fight, then maybe HMC's skill will actually be more of a difference maker in that aspect anyways. So you guessed it, it's a toss up depending on the fight, but they are still both really good here, even if I do think Ranmei is overall more consistent and reliable. Ranmei or HMC can also replace Fugue a bit easier if you have Boothill's E1, which helps out with his ramp up, but the goal shouldn't be benching Fugue, as even if she is replaceable on paper sometimes, the utility of extra toughness for him can't really be overstated. Oh yeah, speaking of ramp up time, the Dahlia gets a turn 1 ult even with 0 ER, meaning she can help Boothill cancel his duel on an enemy by breaking them, giving him a trick shot stack while not ending his turn in exchange for 1 SP. Fugue can do this too, but Ranmei and HMC can't. But in any case, it's just nice to have another teammate that can fill that role for him. The last thing that I want to note here is how close you can get to overcapping on Death Shred, as Boothill's E1 and S1 both give a good amount, with a combined 36%. The free E1 Ranmei gives 20, Fugue gives 18, and we can assume that the Dahlia or Fugue are holding pearls for an extra 16. That's 90% Death Shred. And if we're then running Iron Cavalry, that gives 10% Death Shred on normal breaks and 25% Death Shred on super breaks, meaning for normal breaks we hit exactly 100 or 115% for super breaks. But then we also have the Death Shred from the Dahlia's ultimate, which is 18%, which then massively overcaps us no matter what here. Now, we do want to get as close as possible to 100, but anything over 100 is flat out wasted. You're gonna have to mix and match your gearing to minimize overcapping. Maybe you ditch pearls for some signatures or the Battle Pass Nihility Light Cone, or maybe you don't have E1 Ranmei or E1 Boothill, or maybe you go Eagle instead of Iron Cavalry. There's just a lot of avenues you can take. It's a good problem to have in some ways, as again, getting close to 100% Death Shred is really nice, but it is still something to gear around to minimize wasted stats. So yeah, unlike with Firefly, the Dahlia isn't really solving any problems for Boothill. She's mostly just a way to further improve his nuking prowess, open up his supports and Kalpagni for consistency, while providing some hefty speed and toughness damage. It's a solid upgrade for him, but out of the 3 carries here, he has to be placed the lowest. Oh, what's that? A 4th break carry to talk about? Who is it? It's... Oh, hi Lingsha. Yeah, Lingsha has some serious grounds here as a genuine carry, as she solves the dilemma that the Dahlia's kit brings. On one hand, the Dahlia feels best when stacking her support with other break supports in order to more easily meet toughness thresholds and to better scale the carry's super break damage. But she also wants to be paired with the sustain to activate the very large amount of break effect from her first trace. Well, the obvious solution is to have the carry be the sustain. Yes, in Fire Weak Pure Fictions or just in generic AoE fights, Lingsha break carry is actually pretty dang good. Keep in mind that the Dahlia's first trace gives that large amount of break effect to everyone, and herself, Fugue, and especially HMC have some pretty decent personal damage when it's buffed up by this much. Like with Rappa, there is a bit of reliance on fire weakness for Pure Fiction, but in AoE fights that don't cycle enemies, the Dahlia's implants helps her have a baseline level of performance, and that performance is, again, actually pretty dang good. Obviously, it doesn't beat other break DPSs when played sustainless, but in its optimal scenario, Lingsha can actually outperform her competition when that competition competition has a sustain, which is a realistic scenario for a lot of non-min-maxing players. And I mean, also like with Rappa, you don't necessarily need the fight to be AoE for her to perform. It's both of their best scenarios, but they can still clear generic fights pretty well, all things considered. Her team selection is easier to manage thanks to her filling the sustain role. Now Ranmei is a lot less needed, as we don't need to break faster to make it easier to live. She's still nice to have if you have both her E1 and Battle Pass Lycone, or you could also just run HMC Ranmei Dahlia, since, like with Firefly, Lingsha doesn't have any actual mechanics that rely on breaking, unless if she's running the Thief set. The only problem with Fugueless HMC teams is that they can't benefit from the extra breaking for more energy for their DDDs, but unless if that lost amount of energy actually ends up mattering, things should be fine. Ultimately, just mix and match these three into the last two team slots. You know the drill by now, it's mostly dependent on the fight and the investment level. I don't think this makes Lingsha worth pulling for by itself, but if you do have her on your account, the Dahlia is another step towards making her a genuine option for when the fight works well for her, which to be fair is not a guarantee. Shout out to that stretch of Amphoreus for not having a single fire week perfection for like 4 patches straight. I'll put her next to the other break DPSs, as really they do all get similar things from her. Okay, so there's some other, but what about this unit stuff that we have to go through before we can wrap things up. First, Himeko. Access to a higher cap of weakness break efficiency and more super break can lead to Himeko doing a lot better in fire week perfections. With 150% weakness break efficiency, her follow-up attack does 25 toughness damage. There are a good amount of pure fiction enemies with only 20 toughness. And keep in mind that exo toughness also gives talent stacks while only needing 40% as much toughness to break. So this doesn't outright mean that you can just get infinite follow-up attacks for the entire fight, as there will either be enemies with a lot of toughness or just non-fire weak enemies that will need more than just a follow-up attack to break. But with most of the team having good AoE or blast attack fire hits as well, Himeko should be able to get a good run off depending on the enemy lineup. I'm still inclined to say Lingsha DPS will do better, but if you want to try this out, then go for it. Although again, going sustainless in pure fiction can be kind of difficult, and Himeko's best sustain is Lingsha, so you might just want to run Lingsha as a carry at that point, I don't know. How about Super Break Anaxa? Well, yes, the Dahlia is an improvement for Super Break Anaxa, but the question is there ever a reason to run Super Break Anaxa over a Hyper Carry or Cyrene Anaxa build? Its higher toughness damage can make it better in some APOC fights, or against break shield bosses, so there, sure, the Dahlia is a good addition to his repertoire. He does also have an implant, meaning that he'll have 100% uptime of the 30% speed buff, thanks to his technique giving it at the start of combat. Again, this doesn't mean this is worth using over more conventional Anaxa builds, but it's fun and it can clear just fine. So do what you want with it. Alright, who's left? Xueyi? Well, for what Xueyi wants, the Dahlia is actually kinda great for her. Xueyi wants a toughness bar to break, so she can stack the charges for her follow-up, so breaking an enemy and keeping them broken is sort of counterintuitive, since then they no longer have toughness to damage. By replacing Ranmei, the enemy can recover from break faster, while you then still have 100% super break uptime regardless. Her ultimate and talent stacks also scales off of toughness damage, so she has a unique extra need for weakness break efficiency. And she does still get talent stacks when allies deal toughness damage, which wraps back around to the Dahlia's implant, helping the team consistently support Xueyi. Does this mean that she is a brand new optimal break DPS? No, not really, but for her break build, the Dahlia does increase her peak performance. So Jelly, you can rejoice. Next, Sushang. She's a break DPS, sure, why not? Her best break team now also includes the Dahlia. The same goes for if you're feeling nostalgic and you want to run Hunt March teams. This kind of segues to that other type of break team like with Lingsha, where everyone is kind of the carry and the whole team contributes large amounts of damage. In that sense, Hunt March teams actually do a decent job of clearing, all things considered. Although if you couldn't tell by now, the Dahlia's utility is so universal here that saying something unique with every carry is a bit difficult. She raises the floor of break teams, and with how high that floor can be with using anyone as a DPS, that means she can really work with anyone if you want to put them in that role. You want to run Break Argenti in Pure Fiction? Sure. Break Archer due to his high toughness damage and the fact that she does recover SP out of turn? You got it. Break Welt, Break Hook, Break Misha, Break Feisha or Acheron? Look, I'm not going to name every carry in the game, but if you want to use someone as a generic break DPS, then the Dahlia is the newest default team option to use with them. And if we want to talk about alternative break supports that can work with her, Tribbie, or especially E1 Tribbie, can be great in quantum weak AoE fights like Flame Reaver, and in that same vein, Cypher can be pretty decent if her true damage storing is particularly well suited for a fight. Silverwolf's implant is redundant, although she does get the juicy 30% speed buff, and you would want to delay anyone's implants to make sure Silverwolf implants first so she can properly res shred, as if she implants an already implanted weakness, the extra res pen doesn't come through. But regardless, in single target scenarios that aren't element matching to the carry, she will do just fine. Oh yeah, we didn't rank Gallagher earlier. He goes into the other break support tier, I guess. Fire implant helps him do his job, but most teams want to run sustainless for their high-end performance. But he's still good at what he does, so yeah. Okay, with that, that's everything. I do think this tier list is kind of awkward, as really, the Dahlia is just a best in slot teammate in literally every break team. team. And the only difference is how much of a difference maker she can be in a given team. But even in her worst case scenario, she's still amazing. So yeah, the ordering here is whatever, she's great for all of them. Going to the channel member corner, we have Quilver2444 as our next new member. Thank you so much for joining, and with that, I'll see you all for the Dahlia guide next week. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye!